What's up guys, James here, and welcome back to another video on the channel. In today's video, I'll be talking about the infamous Delphaeus Hills Ghouls creepypasta from the game Carnivores 2, though not in the way you'd expect. You see, obviously the Delphaeus Hills Ghoul doesn't actually exist, but keeping up with Carnivores Hunter's stories and going along with the legend is actually a ton of fun. In fact, if you know me from the Carnivores subreddit, you'll know that I actually made some posts claiming to have seen the ghoul myself. In my opinion, the story behind it is interesting, and it's also really well made, and interesting to keep up with. So why am I telling you all this? Well, at first I was thinking of making another creepy ghouls video going over the story of everything, but the YouTuber Jvirus already has a really good video similar to that. I feel like if I too were to make a video like that, I would just be rehashing the same things he talks about, so I wanted to switch up the topic a bit. If you're a regular to my channel and don't really know what any of this is, I'd suggest watching Jvirus' video on the Delphaeus Hills Ghoul first, and then coming back here. So what's this video all about? Well, today I'm going to be discussing the ARG itself, and looking at the Delphaeus Hills Ghoul from a bit of a critical standpoint. You see, some newcomers to the Carnivores community end up thinking that the ghoul actually exists. Even Jvirus himself believes in the ghoul. But when you look past the surface, there are some noticeable flaws with the story that let you easily know it's just a creepypasta. I'm not saying at all that there's anything wrong with this, as it's actually pretty helpful to the story, but this video is just to clear up some confusion for anyone who genuinely believes in the ghoul. So let's start off at the beginning, with the origin of the ghoul. The first mention of the Delphaeus Hills Ghoul comes from the original Carnivores iceberg. This iceberg first appeared almost 2 years ago in a post by the Green Spy Guy on the Carnivores subreddit. And, wow, can you believe it's already been that long? It does not feel like it's been 2 years. Back on topic, most of the entries on this iceberg are just jokes, and in fact, aside from the ghoul, there are some other Carnivores cryptids on it as well, like the Krungus, Yeti-Man, and Beasties. I think the ghoul just happened to be the least joke-sounding cryptid entry, and that's why it was chosen for the creepypasta. Its first ever mention is on this iceberg. Now, people refute this by saying that there were possibly sightings before the iceberg was made, but there really weren't. You know, even if you just claim people didn't report seeing the ghoul or they were mocked for saying they saw it, you'd expect to at least find a single mention of the ghoul anywhere on the internet or in the community prior to 2020. But that's the thing, there really weren't any ghoul sightings for 21 years. If it existed, I don't think it would go unnoticed for that long. And even so, Carnivores Hunter is really the only person who can genuinely claim to have seen it. Obviously there's Ophius' sighting of the ghoul, but isn't it interesting how he really didn't acknowledge it a single time prior to the creation of the iceberg and the ghoul story? And with the iceberg out of the way, that brings us to the main storyline itself, Carnivores Hunter's history with the ghoul. I really do enjoy his story a lot, but I don't think that it should be taken as fact. It has a natural progression to it, building up from his first post talking about the ghouls to the final photograph. I do think this is a benefit to the story itself, but it discredits the realism a bit, as it's pretty typical for a creepypasta. Carnivores Hunter starts off by saying he's done over 200 excursions in Delphaeus Hills searching for the ghoul, and just before he's about to give up, he manages to spot it near the archaeology outpost, but doesn't give any proof right away, only showing an illustration. When he does get his first photograph of the ghoul, it's really blurry and the creature is located in the distance. This is also the first post where he mentions Ophius. Ophius claims that the ghoul was talked about on the second saga forums, but ironically these forums have been deleted, so we still can't know if there's any proof of it being talked about on there. The final post by Carnivores Hunter relating to the ghoul is the one where the most iconic photograph of it appears, akin to the Patterson-Gimlin film of Bigfoot. This is one of the most cited pieces of evidence supporting the ghoul's existence. But that being said, I still don't think that it proves that the ghoul exists. And to show you what I mean, let's analyze the photo of it first, and then the story accompanying the post. As for the photo, I doubt the creature in it is photoshopped. It fits with the general Carnivores aesthetic, with its textures and its low poly model. It does look to be a custom creature, and its shadow matches up with it. But that being said, there's two things I find suspicious about the photograph. The first is the face. The face of the ghoul in the photograph does look to be edited in my opinion. More specifically the teeth. It has a ton of teeth that I don't think fit in well with the rest of its low polyness. They're really thin and oddly curved, and there's none on the sides of its mouth, only at the front. I think that the teeth were drawn in afterwards. And what's with that weird mohawk hair structure thing it's got going on the top of its head? I doubt that the real developers would put that in, as it looks pretty out of place. The face is almost a bit cartoony in my opinion, so I do think that was edited on afterwards. I think that the ghoul in the image might actually just be an edited Yeti model. Both the Yeti and the ghoul share similarities, but they do also share differences. Now both have similar body builds, but the ghoul is far bulkier and it has a smaller head. So I think that whichever modder created the ghoul took the Yeti model, bulked up the arms and chest a bit, and then shortened the head and created that custom texture for it. Both the Yeti and the ghoul also have 3 fingers and they have similar claws. And why is it that it's a photograph? Why not a screenshot? You know, I think it would have made much more sense to just hit the print screen key. If he's using a Windows device, he could have even clipped it using the game bar. Or why not screen record while looking for the ghoul? Now, the reason for this is because the photograph of the screen gives off much more of a creepy vibe. It's almost reminiscent of found footage. I will say that I like this factor relating to the creepiness of it. Regarding the story of the final ghoul post, isn't it funny how it is the final ghoul post? Right after Carnivores Hunter snaps a photo of the ghoul, he decides to end his investigations into it. And in fact, he almost completely left Reddit after making that post, only posting one more time to show off some photographs that he took. Almost as if that was the climax of the creepypasta that left us on a cliffhanger. He also claims that his game crashed when the ghoul caught up to him, right before the death animation could play. Carnivores and Jvirus both think that the crash was unrelated to the ghoul, but in my opinion it's pretty clear that the crash is a story element put in place to add mystery to the ghoul. I don't think it's a coincidence that the game would have just so happened to crash during the ghoul encounter. Also, if the death animation started to play, Carnivores would have had plenty of time to capture several more photographs of the ghoul. But for the sake of the creepypasta, only one was provided, so his game would need to crash so he couldn't get any more. The game crashing before the death animation leaves us on a nice cliffhanger. And again, I don't think these are any detriment to the story. I actually like these things in the context of the ghoul. Carnivores Hunter's account in general is pretty suspicious. I don't think he's a real person himself, but rather someone in the community using an alternate account. Let me explain. He's only ever spoken in the Carnivores subreddit, and I don't think he's ever gone into the Discord either. So that begs the question, who is Carnivores Hunter 113? Well, when the account first started posting, I thought that maybe it was the Reddit user Lil Green Ghoul's Bud. The username would definitely check out, and he's done some investigating into the ghoul himself, but because of that I also highly doubt it's him now. He also told me that his name is unrelated to the Carnivores ghoul. It's possible that Carnivores Hunter is really Ophius. Ophius knows how to mod, so that would check out with the ghoul's model and textures. He's also intertwined within the creepypasta, as he claims to have seen the ghoul himself, and Carnivores Hunter talks about him in the conversation he had with him. Again though, I don't actually think that Ophius directly is Carnivores Hunter. It would just be a bit too obvious, considering, as I said, he's a part of the ghoul storyline. But I do think that it's highly likely that Ophius knows who Carnivores Hunter is. Ophius, if you're watching, tell me what you think of what I just said. Finally, there are some things that really do put the nail in the ghoul's coffin. The first is that the Redditor AdPublic7481 actually contacted one of the original sound designers for Carnivores. He asked him if the ghoul exists, and according to him, he's almost certain that it doesn't. Aside from this, there's zero tangible evidence that the ghoul exists in the files of the game. If it exists, we should see evidence for it in the files. Now, lots of people say that the reason we don't see evidence for it in the files is because it's hard-coded into the source code, and that it's rarely seen in-game because it's extremely rare. But that's not how it works. You can't just say the reason the ghoul exists is because it's hard-coded into the game. If there was a ghoul in Carnivores 2, there would be evidence for it, either in the form of a model, textures, animations, or sounds, and none of those have been discovered. I also think that we need to remember that Delphaeus Hills is the first map in Carnivores 2, and arguably the most played Carnivores map, considering it's also the first map in the mobile port. Maybe if it appeared on one of the later maps, like Mania Jungle or Mount Ravan, it would be a bit more credible, but we have to remember that Delphaeus Hills is the most played Carnivores map, yet sightings of the ghoul are very infrequent. The only reason the ARG runs with Delphaeus Hills is because the iceberg lists it as the Delphaeus Hills Ghoul, so that's what needed to be ran with. Anyways, those were my points as to why the Delphaeus Hills Ghoul doesn't actually seem that believable once you start to think about it a bit. I'd like to restate that I'm not actually criticizing Carnus Hunter, Ophius, or the story of the Ghoul at all. In fact, I find it extremely interesting, and I myself enjoyed playing along with it and making posts and theories of my own. I really like how Carnivores has managed to gain its own decently well-known urban legend of sorts, akin to Herobrine or the GTA Bigfoot and other popular game legends. This video was simply about me giving my own take on the ARG itself, and for people that genuinely believe that the Ghoul is out there. As always, I'm super grateful for all the support you guys have shown me on my Carnivores videos, and just my channel in general. These videos are a blast to make, and I'd like to start getting into the rhythm of uploading YouTube videos again. My summer break is starting soon, so hopefully that should give me some more time on my hands. And as always, I'll see you on the next one.